get started. But again, what we're going to go ahead and do today is talk with everybody a little bit about some new things that iTree has brought to its science delivery tools with respect to assessing the benefits of your canopy, whether it's for individual trees or whether it's across your broader neighborhood or region. So just to start off, my name is Krista. We also have with us Jason and Anna. We are all part of the iTree team. Scott Macco is also with us, our liaison with the Davey Institute. And as many of you may know, iTree is essentially a cooperative agreement between the Davey Institute and the USDA Forest Service. So we'll talk a little bit about how that works and how we're integrating updated Forest Service data in particular in a little bit. But again, what we're going to talk about today is some of the ways that we continue to make these improvements over time. iTree is coming up on being 20 plus years old. And one of the things that we strive to do often or always is to keep the science up to date and to keep it relevant so that you have the most current information that at your disposal to use for whatever your particular field or discipline might be, whether or not you're looking to manage planting projects or whether or not you're working with municipalities or other nonprofit organizations and educating others about how to think about trees. We do want to let everybody know that, yes, there are CEUs available today for ISA as well as CFE credits from the Society of American Foresters. Those will be available for our live attendees today. And what we will do at the end of this session is make sure you can access from the chat window the form that we will need to have you submit at the request of the organizations. We need your name and basically your member number or your CERT ID so that we can go ahead and process those on your behalf. So stay tuned, and that form we'll put that up at the end as like you might see at a like a live conference for your ISA number, but instead it's going to be the form so that we can do that for you. But first, let's just take a second. This is not an actual quiz where we're asking you to answer anything. No grades, just some food for thought. We wanted to just sort of put some things on the table, things maybe you've accessed some of these features that we're channelizing you with today, but also some things that maybe you were wondering, yeah, it would be really great if a tool like iTree could do that sort of stuff. Again, we understand that the practitioners today are coming from across a number of disciplines, and you don't need to know anything about iTree tools or have used them to, be here and learn something new today. But we just wanted to throw out some questions to get your juices flowing and to get you thinking about the different ways that we know other constituents have used iTree in the past or have looked to use the information about tree benefits moving forward. So with that, what I'm going to do is stop sharing. We are going to start with Anna today, who is going to talk to us primarily about new features that we can see within the set of online tools and how those can be utilized for your goals. Sorry, thanks. Go ahead, Anna.
Thanks, Krista. Let me get this queued up here. Starting the slideshow. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to cover the online tools. So a lot of these updates will be more related to using the user interface. So these are all our browser-based tools, and we'll get later on into the nitty-gritty of the data behind it. But first, I'm going to start with MyTree. So MyTree, we always talk about, is our easiest to use tool. And with this tool, we've actually seen a huge increase of usage, particularly among our international users. So because of this, we added an option to be able to display the monetary values in the local currency. So that kind of saves a step for our users, that you'll just go in and click the country of where the trees are located, and it'll display the values in that currency live to the date. So that's exciting. And then we also have the excuse me, these new tree species icons. So these are, pretty simple, very, North American biased here, but they can be useful for if you're working with a population that isn't as well versed with tree ID. If you're working with really young children or the general public, you can pick up a leaf and be like, oh, this kind of looks like a maple leaf, and just type in or select the leaf that looks like a maple, and it'll show up the genus and use averages to provide benefits related to maple tree of the size that you input. Then next, we've also added this save as image function. So traditionally, if you wanted to share the results from iTree, which looks like this little kind of receipt or nutrition label, you would have the link, or you would either just take a screenshot. But now we've directly added the option to use a save as image. So again, just kind of saves you a step to get those results directly. And we've already seen people use this function. So this is a post from LinkedIn, from social media, from the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, share some information about an example of a northern red oak tree, and they shared this image. So again, just makes it really easy if you're wanting to include the results in a presentation or a social media post. Next, we have Our Trees, which is a relatively new tool that gives you output. It kind of looks, similar to My Tree, but instead of for individual trees, it produces an estimate of canopy cover, as in both percentage of tree cover as well as the total area and impervious surface for a community or a city. So this is using census places. So this is a tool that's only for the US, but it'll summarize really nicely what the canopy cover is providing in terms of benefits for the community. So for my city in Knoxville, Tennessee, it's telling me that the trees in my community provide over $17 million. So it gives you these really nice, facts that you can use for if you're using for a presentation, or you have a meeting or something coming up that can help you, convey those things in a nice compact way, and give you this really nice output that again looks like the MyTree nutrition label, if you will, and breaks down those results as well in terms of absolute quantities and values, depending on if you're looking at carbon or air pollution. And then if you go and look through the tabs, you'll also see some other comparisons, including this Our Tree story that puts these equivalences that, if you're talking to a more general audience, like some, children, or you want to, talk about the public health benefits of the tree canopy cover, it gives you some comparisons that you can easily share. And these results are also easily savable through this save as image function, similar to the MyTree tool. For iTree planting, we've added a new functionality where instead you still have the option to select where the trees are planted by going through the drop-down process of going to your state, county, to your city, or you can use this find location on a map and just drop your pointer on where those trees are going to be located. So you don't, it's not super precise that like the exact park or anything like that, but showing especially if say you're planting trees somewhere along the boundary of these places, does affect how those benefits are calculated. So you can see which geography is being used, and just kind of saves you a couple of steps of finding the location. In the results, you'll also now see the leaf area calculated for the trees that are included in your iTree planting project. So instead of having to go through forming or setting up an iTree Eco project because you want to get leaf area, you'll be able to get that from iTree planting fairly easily. And as well as this graph will show you the cumulative benefits provided by the group of trees that you've included in your project over time. So as we know, a lot of the benefits are coming as the tree grows, so you really are able to see that the accumulation of those benefits over time. And next we have the iTree API. So this is not really a tool, but more of a service that is being offered by Tree, primarily for people with the skill set of software developers. So this use of the API allows users to access those tree benefits, but provides the output in a more customizable way. So this is an example from this inventory software called Tree Plotter that the Department of Forestry from Oregon uses. So they have a database from certain communities that they've included their urban trees, and they are using the API to get both the cumulative benefits of they have 200,000 plus trees already inventoried. But if you were to zoom in, you can also get benefits of those individual trees. And that is, again, using the API to ping the same, model that my tree would use, but it is showing those benefits dynamically. So this is a way to kind of, like I said, use those benefits, but for our users who maybe have a different idea of how they want to display them or are working on a different product, they can access the API and get access those models, but in their own way. I will note that this is the only tool for which there is a fee for. All of iTree is, of course, free, except for the service, and that is of 2 cents per tree. And that is, again, just to kind of cover some of the server fees associated with this service. And just to give you an idea of how the API works, you would be able to include information, obviously, about the location of the tree. You can customize the projection years of how long you want to model the benefits out, and include the number of trees, include mortality rates, such as like you would in iTree planting, along with basic information about the trees. And if you have more that you want to include about the crown width or condition, you can also include that as well. So what that will produce is this code that looks kind of like this, and the output is more code. So again, this is not for your average user. This is definitely for, like I said, more of the kind of people who have a skill set, with coding and software developers and stuff like that. But it is a service that there's been a lot of interest for, that people who want to use iTree, but want to have a different vision of how they want to display those benefits. And next, this is our newest tool, hot off the press, if you will, that was created by Jay Hepler, who is also part of the iTree support team. And this tool aims, which I'll mention, was in partnership with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And the goal of this tool is to quantify stormwater and water quality benefits for trees limited to the United States. So this tool essentially takes the tree growth model of iTree, so using actually the iTree API, and combines it with the hydrology model of iTree, which is iTree Hydro, to get at these benefits. And iTree Hydro Plus is one of our tools that's part of the research suite. So that is one that doesn't have a user interface, so it's not accessible to a lot of people. So this tool aims to kind of, provide a way, a way to use this model and the science behind this model to arrive at these, these estimates for a wider group of people. And you'll also be able to get information about pollutant loading, so including some of those pollutants there. And the input for this, one thing that is really unique or cool about this is that you'll be able to use select your precipitation year. So unlike, my tree or our trees, you can actually compare, different years. So you might be looking at a very dry year versus a wet year, or an average year, and you can kind of make those comparisons and select what type of land cover type is dominant in the area where those trees are, which will affect the hydrology, as well as the percent of impervious surface and the soil texture, and the model, the basic information about the trees, and change the projection years. And the summary tables will look, pretty similar to it if you've used iTree planting, so pretty straightforward. But in addition to getting the avoided runoff, you'll actually get a little bit more specific information about the pollutants. as well as these graphs that show the annual and cumulative accumulation of runoff reduction, and some more interactive graphs by tree group. So you can really delve more into, again, the relationship between the trees on the landscape and hydrology. And yeah, so Jay's put a lot of work into this. So if stormwater management is something you're interested in, or as part of your group, do check it out at stormwater.itreetools.org. So like I said, very few people have heard about this, so you're hearing about this new tool here first. So very excited about that. And looking forward on the horizon of some of the updates that are coming to our tools, we are working to integrate new 5-year averages for pollution and weather. So as a reminder, our online tools, unlike say iTree Eco or the stormwater benefit calculator, you're using averages for the area. So for Knoxville, it's using the average pollution and weather data for the last 5, or the 2011 to 2015, whereas we're working to integrate those averages from 2016 to 2020. So if you see any changes, and maybe you ran a project and then it just changes, that might be why, but those are reflecting a more current or more recent scenarios for those locations. And then we are also updating the cost of electricity, which we know has risen, and fuels and the PPI to 2025 levels. And finally, we also have a big iTree design overhaul. So if you've used iTree design before, it's a really great tool. It has a lot of different functionalities that are of interest to different groups. So, but we haven't updated in a while. So even though it's using the same science as as our other tools, it doesn't look as modern maybe as it could be. So we're really excited to be offering some changes in the interface of that, mostly keeping a lot of what people like, but adding some new things. So as a reminder, iTree Design is one of our tools that is primarily only available in the US and its territories, but thanks to partnerships with our users from these countries, we've been able to expand the use of iTree Design to Canada, Mexico, Colombia, New Delhi, South Korea, and New Zealand. So now users from those countries can use iTree Design, which is really exciting. But with one of the big changes that we're looking to integrate with iTree Design will be to, in addition to plant existing trees, you'll be able to map trees that are to be planted and trees that are to be removed. So that can really help, show a more comprehensive picture of the benefits of the trees, of a project that, some trees need to come down eventually, right? And, especially if they're next to your house. So thinking about, maybe you're trying to replace some of those benefits, or, trying to see which trees would, be best suited to replace the loss of, a big dying tree. So that's really exciting. And we'll also be able to show a little bit more detail about what underlying data is being used. So I'll show that in the next couple screenshots of the prototype so far. And then we also are showing some new graphs that demonstrate the accumulation of benefits over time, kind of like we've seen with our other online tools. And finally, we're working to integrate some new methods to be able to make area-based calculations of carbon. So that will include both canopy cover, but also grasses. So some new science coming your way through iTree Design. And these are kind of a sneak peek of what it looks like so far. So in the green dots, you'll see those are existing trees that are already on the property, and the kind of bluish purple ones are potentially trees to be planted, as well as the red tree is the tree that is to be removed. So again, painting a bigger picture of the tree landscape around, or the trees around the landscape of structures. And similarly, you'll be able to, like I said, plant them and show those energy grids that people like to show to maximize those energy saving benefits of trees in the project. And in the results, you can see the weather and pollution years. So this one is from 2010. And in the graphs, it'll show the values as well as you can see how it breaks down over time and by the benefit type. So carbon, the hydrology, air pollution, etc. And these results will be able to be exported in a PDF if that's how you want to share your results, or you can actually export them we'll be able to export them in a spreadsheet. So again, this is all still prototype, still work in progress. So this will probably look a little different by the time it does go live. But in the meantime, if you do have any suggestions or something that you really like to see that isn't being done in other tools, do reach out to us. We love to hear from you, and while we continue to develop this tool. But yeah, so that's what I have for the online tools. I'm going to pass it over to Jason, and he's going to cover some of the updates to Eco.
That's great. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sort of take half a step back here and just kind of talk about how we got here with iTree, and then I'll jump into a few of the updates we have with iTree Eco. So I'm not going to dwell on this timeline too long, but it really started back in the early 90s. There was a lot of research around ecosystem services of trees, and it was happening in various parts throughout the states. And the iTree Cooperative was formed in around 2005. And that's when we sort of brought all of this research around urban forest and urban tree benefits under that iTree umbrella. And really the kind of key partners are listed on this slide here. But the ones really driving the science, driving the innovation are Davey and the U.S. Forest Service with lots of support.
I'm not seeing your slide.
Huh. All right. Let me try one more time then. How about now?
It's loading.
Perfect.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't get too far into this, so I think we're still okay. So yeah, so in around 2005, that's when the iTree Cooperative. So when Krista mentioned we're around 20 years old, that's what we were talking about. And really the big drivers here are the U.S. Forest Service, which is responsible for a lot of the science, a lot of the data, and Davey does a lot of the software development work, creating the interfaces, making the software usable. And of course, our team that's on here is the support team for the iTree tools, and we are all Davey folks. Of course, we would love to have our Forest Service partners on here, and I do want to recognize that they are a key part of this, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the underlying data, and almost all of that underlying data comes from the U.S. Forest Service. Since they are currently furloughed due to the government shutdown, we couldn't have them on, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows that we work hand in hand with them, and everything that we present today would not be possible without that partnership with the Forest Service. So kind of moving on, what we really saw is this kind of slow growth in the tools over time. And then around the time that we sort of expanded to allow this to be used in other countries, and we sort of added new versions of the easier to use online tools, we really saw a big uptick in growth to where we're getting almost 175,000 annual iTree uses across all the suite of iTree tools every year now. And that's just growing over time, and we're seeing increased growth internationally as well. So lots of good things happening with iTree. And for every year that we've done this, every year that iTree has been out there, there are improvements every single year. There's improvements to the software, there's updates to the underlying data, there's updates to the science. Those take maybe a little longer to get into the tools, but all of this is happening all the time. So it's just really important to keep in mind that these tools are not static. If you haven't used any of the iTree tools in 5 or 10 years, you go in there, you'll see that there are new tools, a lot of those online tools. If you go into one of our existing tools like iTree Eco, you'll see some of the things I'm going to point out, some of the new science and new data happening in the background as well. And just a little bit more on that perspective, this is a little bit of a busy graph, but each one of these lines represents one of our tools and how much use it gets each year. And what you can see is we created some of these online tools around 2016. That was MyTree and iTree Landscape in 2017. And that really kind of turbocharged some of the growth, some of the use of those. You can see we've got this little kind of downtick in iTree Design, but everything else is continuing up, and iTree design, that's one of the things that Anna was talking about. It's just a little dated, so that's why we're going in there with that refresh, and we think we'll probably see increased use and maybe a little bit of a different audience as we move through there. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about iTree Eco. iTree Eco is our main installed software program. It has to be installed on a Windows PC, and it's our flagship software. All the latest science, all the latest data makes it into iTree Eco first, and then we kind of simplify it, regionalize it so that it can be used in some of the other online tools. But iTree Eco is where all the action happens first before we take it into some of the other tools. So within iTree Eco, I sort of think there's kind of three bins of things that happen. We have some new science. We get database updates. So this is the underlying data where we have all the information about species and species growth, where we have things like local weather data, local pollution data, hourly local weather and local pollution data for everywhere that iTree works, that iTree Eco works. And then we have some new features. So this is some software improvements, some user experience improvements. Some of these are a little bit intertwined, but I think those are kind of the three big bins that we have of new things in iTree Eco. So as far as the new science, one of the key new things in the last year or two is we have new reports around leaf nutrients. So this is the publication that new report within iTree Eco is based on. And I think this is pretty timely, at least here. I'm in the mid-Atlantic outside of Philadelphia. It's the middle of leaf season for sure. But what this science does is for all the trees you enter in iTree Eco, it's going to estimate how much leaf biomass you're generating, and then also the nutrients stored in those leaves. So if you're trying to make the case that it's better to keep leaves on your lawn and mow them into your lawn rather than rake them to the curb and have them removed off site, this actually reports out the nutrients you're losing if you take those trees and send them off to your tree collector or leaf collector, take those leaves and send them off to your leaf collector, and the monetary value of those nutrients. Essentially, you're taking some of those nutrients off site when you could be storing them or using them in your lawn and around your own property. So that's the leaf nutrient report. We also, within the iTree tools, especially within iTree Eco, we've always had a few reports around some of the disservices of trees. And this is another one of those. So this talks about the allergenicity of the trees you have in your population. So any trees you enter in there, it'll estimate pollen amounts and classify those into how they contribute to allergens. So some of the reports, these are just out of iTree Eco. You can look at any of these if you have iTree Eco installed. I'm just looking at these in the example report from Grand Rapids. And you can see we estimate pollen production for each species that you've entered in there. And we can also summarize those by land use or however you stratify your project. And this is just categorizing those into low, medium, and high allergenicity species. So if you were really worried about maybe institutional is where you have your schools, where you have your hospitals, and you want to make sure you're planting mostly low allergenicity species there. We have the data, we have that science from that publication to inform those kinds of decisions. So beyond the new science, to get into some of the database updates, one of the big things that we've added is the ability to add locations through iTree database. So there's really two pathways that new locations get into iTree Eco. One is that we do full integrations of an entire country. So in this example here, I'm just showing some of the data we had to integrate all of Mexico once. And the other way is through our iTree database platform, which allows you to integrate individual cities. It even allows you to integrate individual air pollution and precipitation stations. So if you're in the US and you don't see a precipitation station that meets your needs, maybe you have a really localized project and you have a local weather station you'd like us to use, you can upload that data through iTree database. So those are kind of the two core ways that we've expanded where iTree Eco works. And just to show you what that looks like on a map, everywhere that's green here is a fully integrated country. So that means iTree Eco works in those places exactly as it works here in the US. Kind of the most recent countries we've added are Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and the Ukraine have all come online in the last 3 or 4 years. And the other way, that individual city location adding, those are all those little gray circles on here. And I just updated this. Really, a lot of the work to update those individual cities to get that data in here goes through our U.S. Forest Service partners and specifically Alexis Ellis up in Syracuse. And over the last 2 years, Alexis has got us up to 590 user-supplied global cities added in. So that's users submitting their data for their location, and we've added those into iTree Eco. 190 of those have been in the last year and a half. So we're really growing that database of individual locations the users are wanting added to the tool. We've also updated the weather data. So we do this typically every year or two. We're always going to be a year or two behind the current year. Obviously, we can't do 2025 data because the year's not done yet. And even once the year finishes, it takes us a little while to process that data and get it into the tool. But right now we have data through 2023, and that's everywhere that iTree Eco works. We've updated that. We've got more stations and more data in the US, but there are stations throughout the world. So if you want to estimate ecosystem services around stormwater, anything that involves the weather data in iTree Eco, you can do that using data up through 2023. And you can use years before that too. So we're up to 2023 with the weather data. We've also added a new precipitation data source. So we've added this GPM data. This is global precipitation measurement. So this is actually a product of NASA. So it's satellite measured rainfall. So it just gives another option for folks. Maybe you don't have a really good measuring station nearby, so we can provide precipitation data in more locations. Maybe your station went offline for some time during the year, so it just gives another option. So when you're selecting weather data, you now have this option to use the GPM data. And you can see I've got an example here. This is from New Delhi, our old NCEI data that we used to use and that we still use everywhere. You can see it was relatively low in New Delhi. A user there supplied some information that was around 756 millimeters, which really lines up really well with that GPM data. So it's just another really nice data source so that you can get more localized and accurate information wherever you're doing your iTree Eco project. We've also updated the pollution data. So the pollution data is now through 2023. And this is kind of one of those combination data and user experience things. You can now select multiple stations. We have a weather station picker, which we didn't have before. You just selected a location and we would automatically assign pollution stations. In this case, you can select those stations. So this is near me in Philadelphia, and you can see all the different stations we have. Different colors in each one of these markers indicates which pollutants we have. You can select one of these, you can select multiple, and there's a really nice table where you can turn them on and off. If you select multiple stations, it's going to average them. So in a city like Philadelphia that's pretty big, maybe we want stations that cover more of the city, and it will average all that information so we'll get a more accurate estimate. And you can see exactly where this data is coming from. So this has been a really nice addition to the tool as far as allowing users more flexibility and more control of what data is being used in the background. We've also updated a lot of our default monetary values. One of those is the carbon price, which is now $130 per metric ton. This comes from our EPA social cost of carbon estimate, and we're using the midpoint of this 2.5% discount rate. So that's how we come up with that 130 per metric ton, since we're between 2020 and 2030 here in 2025. We've also updated our producer price index. Anna mentioned this, so this applies to all the tools. This essentially accounts for things like inflation, and it applies to our monetary prices for air pollution removal. So you can see if we started way back in 2012, this is what this index is to. We're up about 35% over those prices. And the big increase has been since 2020, since the pandemic, since we had a bunch of inflation. So if we don't adjust those prices, we're going to be underestimating tree ecosystem services. So we're going ahead and updating those prices based on that producer price index. We're also adding new emission data. So this is, Anna mentioned this as well, but we're updating to these e-grid factors. So this tells us how much carbon is being emitted by electricity generation in various places. So where you're estimating electricity-related ecosystem services of trees, we now have more accurate estimates of what those are, more up-to-date estimates, and better monetary values. And just as a reminder, anytime prices are changing fast, it takes us a little while to get the data, to update the data. You can always adjust those prices on your own within iTree Eco in the benefit prices table. You're always going to get better prices if you've got local numbers, but we do have these default values, and we use these default values across all the tools, and we are updating them all the time. One other user experience update that I'll mention real quick here is that you can import data. So we've had complete inventory import for a while, but we've added plot inventory import. So you can import your plot data. It's pretty slick. We have a video that is maybe 5 or 7 minutes long about how to get that plot data in there. And this inventory import, whether it's plots or complete inventory, has been really powerful. It's really driven the use of iTree Eco and how many people are using. We've seen our projects since we implemented that import around 2022. We've seen the number of eco projects really balloon up to over 10,000 a year. And the even bigger ballooning here is that last year we had over 100 million trees run through iTree Eco to estimate ecosystem services. And I think we'll get pretty close to that here in 2025 as well. And I think a lot of that is driven by people importing data. People often importing data, projects up to 500,000 trees. And then they can take those out. Oftentimes they're going to create a map, things like that, that they can use in their own dashboard. So that import has been a really powerful tool for a lot of folks. One other thing we've added is public project sharing. So people always want to know, can I see other people's projects if I want to use them in my own research? We don't really have any way to vet these projects, but we have added this project sharing so that you can upload your projects and other folks can access them if they're interested in. Then you provide a little bit of metadata. Your email will be shared with this project. The entire project will be shared. So if you're worried about privacy at all, you want to make sure that there's no information in there that you want to keep private. This was an example. I uploaded a project from Camden, New Jersey the other day. I provided some metadata, how we collected the data for that project in case anyone else wants to use it. And it appears on our public project sharing websites down here, and you can see that metadata file here. The same information I entered. So if you're interested in other people's projects or sharing your own, that's a nice feature that we've added within the last year or two. So just real quickly, what's next? We're going to update some of the data and methods, add some new science. One of the big things is we're going to use new carbon equations from the U.S. Forest Service, from their Forest Inventory and Analysis program. This should provide more accurate carbon estimates. So if you're doing any sort of carbon counting, these will apply across all our tools eventually, but they'll be more in line with what the U.S. Forest Service puts out. We're going to update to the newest weather data. We were hoping to have the 2024 weather and pollution data before the end of the year, but the government shutdown has slowed that down a little bit. So we might still get there, but if not, early in 2026, you'll see that 2024 data. We're going to add some pollution quality ratings so you can see which pollution stations are providing the best data. So again, allowing you an opportunity to select that data and make sure that you're getting the results you want. And we're going to update some of our pest host ranges. So where different forest pests are and which species they are, which species host them and which species they're problematic for. All that's going to be updated in the coming year as well. So keep an eye out for that. As far as new science in the works, the place to always look for the new science is our research suite, which you can find on the website. That's where we're kind of exploring new ideas and new topics to include in the tools. Anna mentioned that Hydro Plus tool. We'd like to get some of that improved stormwater modeling into iTree Eco. We're also exploring ways to better capture heat and urban heat island effects and incorporate those into iTree Eco, and also doing some more exploration around energy modeling, maybe including the effects of different building types and things like that in the energy effects models in iTree Eco. So with that, I think I'm a couple minutes over time, so I don't want to take too much of Krista's time. But Krista, I will hand it over to you to talk a little bit about new things in iTree Landscape.
Thanks, Jason. That sounds good. And actually, I think we're doing pretty well on time. And I do want to take just a minute to mention to folks that we are aiming to leave some time at the end of today's session for some Q&A. Folks have been letting us know some of their questions along the way in the chat window. You're welcome to keep doing that. Anyway, what we've saved for our third piece of this presentation is iTree Landscape. Some of you may know that from where I sit, that means we've saved the best for last. But Having said that, iTree Landscape is essentially our tool that uses a mapping platform in order to both visualize and help you analyze your canopy in context. So it's a tool that provides a variety of robust data sets, including canopy and some of the other benefits that we've been talking about today, makes those available in this mapping platform for visualization so that you can take a look at your canopy and the surrounding environment. And you can even say what things are important to me in terms of where my tree benefits are being felt the most, where do I want to maybe make improvements in management. So those prioritization options are also available through iTree Landscape. And the largest new feature that we have for landscape is definitely one of the longer awaited updates that has to do with the National Land Cover data set that includes the tree canopy cover for the nation. Landscape is one of the only tools that provides that in terms of having no gaps across the country for these features and these data sets. And essentially what that means is that for actually since the inception of Landscape, we've been working with the visual data layers from 2011 as, produced and made available from the Land Consortium, the Multi-Resolution Land Consortium, of which the Forest Service is a part. In addition, the Forest Service with the in production with the Forest Inventory Analysis Program does work on what is just the tree canopy layer. Tree canopy is also available within the land cover data set, but we do isolate tree cover in particular. And data for 2016 and 2021 for both of these layers have now been made available and are being utilized within the analysis for iTree Landscape. The layer tells us what percent of an area is considered canopy. The tree benefits are calculated accordingly. Many of the things that we've been talking about throughout the presentation so far, the different calculations and where those have been updated as well. So things for ways that carbon storage gets calculated and how those values are determined in a tool like Landscape are based on these percentages of canopy that can be seen for a variety of geographic locations. So these updated land cover classes and the tree canopy layer have been integrated into this system. And just to quickly go ahead and show you how the user interface looks a little bit different for these particular features. If you've worked with Landscape in the past, you'll know that the year of the land cover data was usually accessed towards the underneath the map with the table. We've now moved this set of data that's available up to the land tab that's in the navigation section on the top right section of the tool. And what that means is that by looking at those canopy layers that are available, you can toggle them on and off, but we now have this drop-down menu that includes not just 2011 and 2001, which were the years of data that we had previously, and now we've updated to 2016 and 2011, again, with the Land Consortium version of the National Land Cover data set, as well as that Forest Service tree canopy cover layer. So, sorry, I should have pulled up the closer up version of that before I started telling you what each of those years were. But that's where you can access that in for those different layers, both for visualization as well as for your analysis. So let's take a look at what the legend tells us. I always try to remind people that when you're working with Landscape, there are a lot of options within this tool that sit next to question marks. And if you look at those, what you're going to find is the reference information and frequently the legend or the key that's going to tell you what the visual layer is showing you. So these data sets are set up to reference the percent of canopy utilizing a particular color ramp, this color scheme, and that's how you're also going to find the references to the new data layers and more information about their methodology. We can quickly take a look at how this appears within landscape. So here we can see this is actually an area of Pennsylvania, a little bit north of Reading, so sort of in the central part of the state. We can see in 2011 what the layer for land cover, tree canopy in particular, looked like. And as we update that, yes, the first thing you're going to notice is that the color schematic is a little bit different. That is not indicative of a change in the intensity or the density of canopy coverage. It is literally a different color ramp. So again, this is why I like to reinforce the idea of working back to those legends and the origins of the data. But if you've been working with a location for a while, you may notice in some of those areas distinct changes across canopy, across your canopy where you are. And just with respect to showing you what the national land cover itself looks like, it is a little bit different, although it does include tree canopy. Landscape can, for areas across the country, tell you what proportions of land cover you have. So in this particular instance, we have developed areas, we have agricultural areas, as well as those canopy areas. So just, to sort of see how those adjustments look in those layers over time. You're not always going to see a whole lot of difference, but in some places you will see those changes. And keep in mind that this is not an update of the resolution for this data. The national data layers for land cover are still being offered at a 30-meter resolution, which just means that the land cover on the ground is being assessed for a 30 by 30 meter square grid on the ground. So that's how that's being assessed. And just again, the reminder of where you can go to get more information about how these classifications are made and where this data, where the technology comes from to get classified that way. Quickly, I want to just go ahead and include some of the features that make landscape as robust as it is. Again, it is, this plays out in the data by allowing you to select areas of interest using primarily different census geographies across the globe. In this case, I've selected in this area that we were looking at a few census block groups, but you can also do this by looking at counties. You can look at watershed level data, and you can also certainly compare and contrast some, statewide level information. But usually the value is in these comparisons of, the specific area of interest within a region. And what landscape is going to do then is show you that information for your selected geographies in tabular form. Sometimes you don't just want to be able to see the where your canopy cover is strongest. You're actually looking for the numeric breakdown for your analysis. So what we can see here is that for 2021, in the table that comes up with my information for selected geographies, it's going to identify for me which year I've chosen, and I would go back to that land cover, that land tab, to choose one of the other years. And I want to bring your attention to what we can see in terms of the distribution of canopy coverage. This is just sorted from highest to lowest in this particular case. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. We are going to go back and look at 2016, but then specifically, if we go all the way back to 2011, we can see what is in this order, in using this chronology, the 2011 values are lower than what we could see from 2021. But I want to also be a little bit just sort of, adding information to how you can view these numbers. That does not always represent, in this case, a 10% increase in canopy coverage because of a particular development project or a growth program. Because this is looking on that regional level, what I wanted to especially make note of is that what we saw in 2021 was a difference in that high to low. The gradient was about 10 or 11 points in terms of the diversity that you could see at the time. And because when we reference the 2011 numbers, we're still seeing that 10 to 11% gradient, which shows us that this is primarily in this instance an indicator of the additional technology and methodological updates that were brought to this layer and this assessment for canopy. If you have particular questions about, any of this stuff after you've absorbed it and taken a look, you can always ask us for more information about what you're seeing in a particular area with the values, but it is important to keep in mind that it's not a situation where the 2011 data was inaccurate or is inaccurate, but for its time frame, it represents the technology that was available, and the updates represent what we can see as a refinement of that data. So keep that in mind as you're looking across, if you're looking across time and considering the possible reasons for your changes in canopy. Quickly, I also wanted to just show everybody that the prioritization configurations in landscape have gotten a little bit more user-friendly. One of the things that we've done is incorporated in the same place the subset of different options that you can use, the standardized pre-created prioritization options for things like population. We can see that it's a little bit different if we want to look at the density of populations that might be minorities or living in poverty. Also note that we can still customize this, but a little bit more simply when we opt for that other tab. And what that can allow us to do is say, I also want to call in my benefits instead of just some standard things about where do I know I have higher canopy density? Where do I know I have higher population density? What if I also want to look at things like where do I know my current total air pollution removal rates are low? Where do I want to look and see where other populations of interest I might want to focus on, but also where there might be instances relating to where do I know my temperatures are warmer on average than they are from the rest of my region. So again, those kinds of elements can all be brought into a custom crafted scenario. I did want to point out that we also have the index is definitely a little bit more, it's easier to see the index values that are being calculated every time you select criteria and weight them, if that's something you choose to do. Those index values will change, your ranking, as it were, the scores that each different location might have. And these are also scenarios that you can save across along the way, and that can help you in reporting if it's something that you want to be able to call up as one of your prioritization scenarios for mapping purposes. Before I get away from this page and tell you a little bit about what's on the horizon for landscape, I do want to reference really quickly that one of the other teeny tiny updates that we made, but many people will find this useful. We've been looking at census block group geographies, and as many people know, or if you don't know, they're usually identified by numeric code only. One of the things that our developers have done is they've gone into these geographies and they've said, instead of only giving me a numeric value that doesn't mean a whole lot to many people, we're going to assess the area for a common place of interest and identify the area by that name. So these are helpful when you're looking at areas that are close to you. If the the landmark happens to be a reference that's familiar, that's going to be great, and it's going to help you keep track of things. But be aware that that's where those come from. And for example, with block groups in particular, those are not designated names for neighborhoods. Those are names for nearby landmarks and other points of interest that help identify a location. So quickly, the other big question about landscape is frequently, when are we going to update the census data? We are currently making data for the census, the 2010 census is where our demographic data comes from. We have been working for a few years actually to update this information. Census 2020 definitely saw a different number of survey adjustments and edits than we usually expect. One of the things that that's going to bring us to is graduating to offering census geography that is from the American Community Survey, which is a little bit different than the decennial census, but it's going to bring us up to speed a little bit better in terms of the additional information that we'll have for 2024. We will also be increasingly adding to the data layers that are available, both for visualization and for analysis. Some of those will be at higher resolutions than we've been able to see them in the past. Particularly, for example, the Wildlife Hazard Potential Index is now available in this 30-meter range resolution, so it'll be definitely more compatible with the other data that we have. All of those things will lend themselves to new prioritization scenarios that we're hoping to make available, and even in those pre-selected areas as well. So definitely stay tuned. Quickly, I want to also go ahead and just bring us back to our true or false questions that we had at the top. Now you're definitely ready to roll, and you either know, or definitely now you know, all of the items that we had listed, all of those questions, all of those features are in fact true across the tool set. We've talked about them today. So definitely keep that in mind as you know, if any of those particular questions was intriguing to you, and as you have additional questions in the future, those are some of the things that we strive for. So again, what I want to do at this juncture is leave our last few remaining minutes for questions if folks have them. But we are at this point going to go ahead and let everybody know and remind people definitively that we really need you to fill out this form in order to go ahead and request those CEUs available for today's session, or CFEs if that's if you're with Society for American Foresters. It's a straight up Google form, and it's just so that we make sure we have your name and a way to contact you, as well as your member ID, and we will cross-reference that with attendance today. So with that, what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen. We're going to go ahead and put the Google form in the chat. And I know that we can entertain some questions at this point. And I think that, yeah, we have some information about, you know, just reminders of other ways to contact us and keep in touch.
Yeah, I'll put up that slide here in a second, Krista, but I did want to get you
Thanks,
started
Jason.
on a question. We had a good question from David. How large an area can you select in iTree landscape? I figured I would have to type a really long answer in the chat, so I thought we could do that live.
The selectable geographies in landscape max out at state level for the most part, with the exception of some of the other federal land databases and geographies that we have available. Landscape does not currently accept any user uploaded GIS boundary files, and it's not one of the tools that we have that allows users to draw their own boundary. Keep in mind that in terms of what that can mean for processing, you know, the larger an area is, it doesn't necessarily make it harder to process, but you will see differences if you're looking at either large geographies. Usually, more specifically, it's if you're trying to work with several small geographies at one time. Those are things that will impact, you know, things like processing times, or your ability, the number of things that you can see at one time. So hopefully that's helpful to that question in terms of how large an area. Yeah, I'd say it goes up to state level and several boundaries that will sit within your state.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Krista. We also had a question from Naomi, and I think I mostly answered it in the chat, but Naomi was just asking if the weather and pollution data updated through 2023 was available everywhere outside the US. And I didn't quite make that clear, so I just wanted to go ahead and clarify. The weather data with the updated precipitation with that GPM data is available everywhere, but the pollution data is pretty localized and differs country to country. So we need in-country partners and an agreement to update any of that data for the pollution data outside the US. So we do have a few countries where we have those relationships. I think South Korea, I think their data is updated, and a few other places, but mostly, yeah, we need local partners because we don't have a global database of air pollution data. So if you need updated air pollution data, you can submit that through iTree database or connect with us through that info@itreetools.org. I can't see the chat right now, Anna. I don't know if there's anything else in there. I see Maria has her hand up too, if we want to unmute.
Yeah, no new questions. I think you addressed Matthew's clarification about the NLCD data. So.
Krista, can you unmute Maria? Or Maria, you could type your question in the chat too.
Maria, I have opened up your microphone. So if you still have a question, it would be great to see you. You should be able to unmute yourself. Okay.
Maybe not.
No problem, Maria. Understood. We're good. Still good to see you.
Well, good. I really do appreciate everybody joining us. We weren't quite sure how many folks would show up. We lost some of our outreach partners with the Forest Service being offline. So we really do appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to show up. Please do, if you want CEUs, if you're in the ISA or SAF, submit that form, enter your information in that form. And just quick reminders, we will do our iTree Academy in the spring. So if you want to get updated on using all things iTree, check us out. You can always find out more from LinkedIn or the newsletter. And we do have those office hours, the second Thursday of every month at 2 p.m. The three of us will always be there, and we were always happy to talk to whoever shows up. They're often interesting and a lot of fun, especially when you all start talking to each other about the projects you have going on. So thanks everybody for your time. Thanks for joining us, and feel free to reach us anytime at info@itreetools.org with any other questions.